The jury's in. Final Fantasy XVI is officially the worst game of 2023. But before I explain why, I gotta do a post-mortem on the last video, because my impressions of the game just won't make any sense without the proper context. Interestingly, I knew that video was gonna get a negative response from ignorant white people, which is exactly what the thumbnail was referring to. A lot of people thought that thumbnail was directed at Square Enix, and some idiots out there were dumb enough to think that that video was grounds for a defamation lawsuit. See, a significant portion of the videos on this channel have to do with the Metal Gear series, which is where I assume most of our subscribership comes from. Unfortunately, the Metal Gear fanbase is one of the worst communities I've ever had the misfortune of interacting with, so like most of the content on this channel, that Final Fantasy video was designed to encourage racist, misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, hideous Kojak-ass fanboys to go the hell away and never come back. So yeah, I knew there was going to be some negative feedback for that video, but I was expecting it to come from existing subscribers. I never would have imagined that angry white people would come from all over the internet to compete in what turned out to be the Olympic Games for ignorance. Had I known that so many neo-Nazi Klansmen would make that video as infamous as it now is, I would have spent a lot more time on it. But I got shit to do, so a lot of stuff had to be cut from the script in order to finish the video in a timely manner. And since it turned into a rush job, there were a few points that didn't get properly explained and a joke or two that didn't land, so I want to revisit that last video and clarify a couple things. I want to remind everyone that this topic is not open to debate. There is zero potentiality for argument here. If we see a comment that's even vaguely argumentative, you're going to be banned. A lot of people take issue with that policy, and I understand to a degree, so allow me to elaborate. For one, why the fuck would I waste my time arguing with someone who has the emotional intelligence of a toddler? I wouldn't. So you can treat this channel like one of those bars where the age limit is 27. This ain't a daycare, bruh.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Somebody on Reddit said something that caught my attention. You could tell this was somebody who thought they were really intelligent, but they were responding to a Reddit post, so clearly they weren't that smart. Anyway, the dude said something like not welcoming criticism was like me claiming that all the birds that I've ever seen are blue, therefore all the birds in the world must be blue, and you're not allowed to tell me otherwise. And that is exactly why I refuse to tolerate anybody looking to start an argument. Because they focus on the birds. But it's not about the fucking birds. Nobody gives a shit about the birds. Shut the hell up about the birds already. The point of the video was to say, all the birds that I've seen so far are blue, here's how that makes me feel. Here's how that affects me. Here's the impact that seeing nothing but blue birds has on my life. If someone feels the need to point out that there are other kinds of birds in the world, what they're actually saying is, your feelings are wrong because your observations are wrong. You're not actually experiencing what you perceive because your reasoning is flawed. And that's the problem. Ignorant white people are going to scrutinize every single word I say to try and find a weak point that they can exploit as a justification to continue inhibiting progress. That's why I'm saying all this up front. I know it's not going to work because certain white people are too stupid to follow even the most basic of instructions, but I still gotta try. If your objective is to start some shit, you're banned for life. No one will ever read your comment. You are wasting your time. Just click the thumbs down or report the video. I don't know what you think that's gonna accomplish. You know how many people commented on the last video saying they had reported it for hateful content? Dozens! And yet, out of the past 10 videos that were uploaded to this channel, that one was seen the most. So I want to thank all the racist white people on Twitter for contributing to the development fund. Every bit helps. Speaking of white people, I really got to explain myself when it comes to this term. To reiterate, I refuse to call someone white unless it's in regards to a politician or some other equally worthless creature. Because you never hear somebody who isn't a Klansman use the term white people with a positive connotation. It always means something negative, and when people use it to describe themselves, it's always in a self-deprecating way. So I would never want to insult anybody by calling them white unless I was specifically trying to insult them. Something that got cut from the last video was me explaining that I do my best to find out someone's actual ancestry if I need to describe them. Someone could be French, or German, or Irish, or whatever they might be. If I don't have that information, then I'll say either of European descent or Caucasian. But under no circumstances will I use the term white as a generalization. White describes a very specific kind of people. The worst kind. Sometimes though people get pigeonholed, like if they're filling out a form at the DMV or whatever, and white's the only option on there. But that's some bullshit. The DMV needs to get with the times and change the form. Cause let me explain something to you. If you willingly identify as white, and that's how you prefer to be described, you're less than garbage. And rest assured, you're gonna be completely eradicated sooner or later, as all barriers to progress have been eliminated throughout history. It's only a matter of time, so if that's you, then I suggest you get with the program. In case there was still any confusion, yes, I am absolutely racist against white people, if that's even possible. And it isn't, because as far as I'm concerned, it has absolutely nothing to do with what you look like. Your behavior is the only factor that determines whether you're white or whether you're invited to the cookout, not your skin color. But that's my personal philosophy, and I'm not trying to force anyone else to adopt it, nor am I encouraging anyone else to do so. Can I make that any more clear? Of course I can't, because no matter what I say, white people are going to be mad. And the frustrating part is that brown-skinned white people, the Uncle Toms as we call them, they're going to be the most vocal about it, because they think that if they fall in line and act right, they'll become real white people. Like Pinocchio. So if all the punk-ass marks out there are going to be mad no matter what I do, I might as well go all out. I would say maybe I should find a different word to avoid confusion, because if it has nothing to do with skin color, then I shouldn't be calling people white at all. So instead of white people, how about colonizers, or something like that? Yeah, what do you think? I'll tell you why I'm not going to do that. It's because those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. They're called white people specifically because they perpetuate white supremacy, the ideology employed by hate groups like the KKK and the Nazi Party. So if I explain why the lack of racial diversity in FF16 is a problem for brown-skinned individuals, and someone tries to refute my points, clearly that person wants to maintain the status quo, that being the concept that Caucasian males are the default protagonist, and anyone else is either optional or expendable. Anybody who does that is in the same category as a neo-Nazi. They might not be the one who personally lights the match and sets the cross on fire, but actively trying to undo all the work people are doing to improve the standards of living for people of color in the world makes them culpable. No matter what you look like, if you spread white supremacy, you are white. And you're also a piece of shit who's not welcome in this community. In the last video, I made a very obvious joke that Sunday brunch was some, quote, white people shit. It was funny as hell, but a lot of people took it personally. They thought I actually considered Sunday brunch to be on the same level as fascism and colonialism. And people really wonder why I'm not trying to argue with these idiots. Again, whiteness is a cultural distinction that has nothing to do with skin color. There are people of color who are culturally white. They're real easy to spot too. 9 times out of 10, they start their comment with, as a brown person, and you can usually find them complaining about terms like people of color, or Latinx. See, they didn't do too well in math class, so it never occurs to them that the X is meant to be a variable designed to accommodate people who identify as non-binary. At the same time, there are people of European descent who don't want anything to do with that system. Usually, these people tend to reside in highly populated regions with access to a public library. The idea that someone could be culturally black led to a joke that didn't go over with a lot of people. See, where I'm from, there are Asian communities that have been invited to participate in black culture, because when their families immigrated and they were looking for a group to integrate with, the colonizers weren't who they gravitated towards. But they never let go of their own cultural heritage, making them travelers between worlds. So as a joke, I said the only difference aside from skin tone is that they eat soup instead of ribs. That shit had us dying in the studio. So if you didn't like it, then I'm sorry that you live a miserable, humorless existence. Yeah, your life sucks. I don't know what to tell you. Some of you might be wondering, if it's possible to be classified as white regardless of your appearance, then surely the same property applies to black people. The fuck? Hell no! Sounds contradictory, right? You gotta understand, someone can be culturally indistinguishable from the black population of their particular region, but they wouldn't call themselves black unless they're messed up in the head. Identifying as black with a capital B is a display of solidarity by people who are discriminated against all around the world simply because of what they look like. Because of that, you don't call yourself black unless you look the part. But there are also people who are clearly of African descent that don't identify as black. Then there are people who are mixed, but you'd never know it by just looking at them, like Wentworth Miller and Rashida Jones. Then, you have Africans of European descent like Charlotte Copley and Charlize Theron. Needless to say, shit is complicated, but it's also extremely simple. Because if you don't live this shit, then all you have to do is shut the fuck up and listen.
That was easy.
I welcome you to ask questions if you're curious, but just know that any comment that isn't written with the highest degree of reverence is gonna be your last. So now that you have a little more context, hopefully some of the jokes from the last video make a little more sense. But why would I even write jokes into a video about such an important topic? Doesn't an overly humorous tone lessen the impact of the intended message? Here's the thing. The subject of diversity and inclusion in video games is in fact extremely important. But because so many companies treat it like an afterthought, it's also a really depressing subject to talk about. Every waking hour, another innocent child dies needlessly at the hands of corruption. My dreams are haunted by their cries for justice. But none shall be had this day. No. For the ears of the world are truly deaf. Its eyes are blind, as we are but a cancer upon it, endlessly reaping its flesh, bleeding it dry. Now imagine maintaining that tone for 5 straight hours, because that's about how long a recording session can take for a video of that length. That's how you get fucking stomach ulcers and shit. I'm not trying to do all that. So introducing comedy into the script makes intense subjects like that easier for me to talk about, which in turn makes it easier for the audience to digest. And that's one of the primary objectives of comedy. It allows us to talk about intense, depressing subjects without giving each other PTSD. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. Here's why Final Fantasy XVI is officially the worst game of 2023, and by far the worst Final Fantasy in the entire series. Actually, wait. I don't think I can speak to the quality of FF16 because, I haven't played the full game, and I'm not gonna play it either because that game doesn't interest me in any way whatsoever. Thankfully, though, I know somebody who's much more qualified to talk about the game than I am. Recently, I had a chance to talk to Jonah-san about the latest entry in the Final Fantasy series. For over a decade, Jonah's been putting in work, spreading awareness about various social issues. The two of us agree that big companies like Square Enix need to do a better job when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and representation. Unlike me, though, the abysmal lack of diversity in FF16 wasn't a deal breaker for Jonah. In fact, he had a great time with the game, so you can be sure that nothing he says comes from a place of bias. Here's a highlight.
I think that Yoshi P knew that the toxic gamers would have taken this and run with it and made memes and jokes and been very inappropriate. Before the game ever released, I think around the same time as that interview, there was a clue when they said that this game was going to include mature themes like prostitution, drug use, hate crimes, and the big one, slavery. We just didn't know to what extent that slavery or any of these other things would be involved in the story of Final Fantasy XVI. Well, guess what? Slavery is what Final Fantasy XVI is all about. Now I see why he didn't want black and brown people in this game.
The full conversation will be uploaded for all our patrons, and if you want to hear more of Jonah's thoughts about FF16, you should check out his latest video. Link in the description and the pinned comment. Wait a minute, if I'm not going to talk about FF16, was the title of the video and the thumbnail just clickbait? Yeah. Good job figuring that one out, detective. The point of the title and the thumbnail was to show everybody how stupid you are, because your entire life revolves around what other people think. Do you have any idea how pathetic it is to need for your opinion to be validated by strangers on the internet? You don't, because you're an idiot. If you like Final Fantasy XVI, it doesn't matter if I think it's trash. If you had a single functioning brain cell, you wouldn't have even clicked on the video. But everybody knows that if the game had a 67 on Metacritic, all you'd do is talk shit about it. Never mind the fact that game journalists these days are so trash at video games, they couldn't even name the buttons on the controller they used to play the fucking thing. So yeah, it was clickbait. And the reason you're so upset right now is because you took the bait. Now you're trying to blame me for your stupidity like it's my fault that you're so gullible. And if you're the type of contrarian who was looking for ammo to use against the casual fans on Reddit, you're almost as dumb as the people who are mad at the title of this video. I mean, if anything, you really should be thanking me, See, because now you know exactly how feeble-minded and impressionable you are. Imagine if I hadn't intervened. If it wasn't for me, you'd be the guy who falls for the free candy trick and gets in the windowless van, then winds up on the news after being skinned alive. With this information, you can finally take the proper steps toward being less of an embarrassment to the entire species. So you're welcome. Except you're not welcome on this channel because you're literally too stupid to appreciate the content we produce. Click the dislike button and keep it moving. Thanks for watching.